Welcome to the EvoEd COVID-19 video series. In this video, we'll take a look at the Omicron variant. We'll discuss what might make it more transmissible but less virulent. By the end of this video, you should be able to explain the concept of transmissibility virulence trade-offs as it relates to the evolution of Omicron, and describe two major features that makes the Omicron variant different from previous strains of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The Omicron variant was first detected in South Africa and declared a variant of concern by the World Health Organization on November 26, 2021. The major cause for concern was the large number of 37 mutations on the S gene, more than any of the previous strains of the virus. More mutations means there's a greater chance the virus has gained new functions, such as immune evasion or increased transmissibility. And in the case of Omicron, it had gained both. Similar to Delta, some of these mutations appeared to help Omicron evade adaptive immunity, causing reinfection in those who were previously infected by another strain of the virus, and even those who were fully vaccinated. Omicron is far more transmissible than previous strains of the virus. For contrast, the original strain of the virus had a reproduction number of around 2 to 3. Delta is around 5, and Omicron is around 7, making it the most contagious coronavirus ever recorded. However, although the recent Omicron wave did have many costs, it was overall less severe than those caused by previous strains of the virus. So why might Omicron be more transmissible but less virulent? As a refresher, virulence refers to the severity or harmfulness of an infection and its symptoms. To answer this, let's first consider why viruses are virulent in the first place. Well, it completely depends on how virulence relates to the reproductive success of that particular virus. In other words, viruses may evolve to become more or less virulent depending on how it influences their ability to replicate. It's clear that all viruses benefit from some level of virulence towards their host by redirecting the host's resources towards their own replication. But can a virus be too virulent? Well, if they cause rapid mortality or serious illness, this might reduce that virus's ability to transmit from host to host, especially in respiratory airborne viruses such as SARS-CoV-2. As such, in some cases, it's expected that as pathogens are selected to be more transmissible, some of the same features that make them more transmissible might actually tend to result in decreased virulence. This is a classic example of what is known as an evolutionary trade-off. So could the decreased virulence of Omicron be explained by this type of trade-off? Maybe. One other important factor to consider is that since the emergence of Omicron, vaccination efforts and natural infections have significantly raised the overall immunity of the population. But with that being said, Omicron does possess a variety of other features that may describe why it's more transmissible but less virulent. Firstly, Omicron enters the cell differently compared to other strains of SARS-CoV-2. Recall how the original strain of the virus required two membrane proteins to enter the cell. They first must bind to an ACE2 receptor and then have their spike proteins cleaved by TMPRSS2 in order to penetrate the cell membrane. Omicron similarly binds to ACE2 receptors, but it doesn't need TMPRSS2 to enter the cell. It can directly enter the cell through a process called endocytosis. Since TMPRSS2 receptors aren't on many cells, this new form of entry grants the virus access to a wider amount of cells to infect, an estimated 7 to 10 times more to be exact. Lung cells are particularly rich in TMPRSS2, which likely explains the tendency for other strains of the virus to lead to severe respiratory disease. Since Omicron can effectively infect the upper airway, even though it has less TMPRSS2, it may localize there instead of diving deep into the lungs and contribute to explain the overall decreased virulence associated with the strain. As it turns out, this isn't the only change in the virus that might help keep Omicron out of the lungs. Scientists have examined responses from Omicron to interferons, which are small proteins that alert the innate immune cells of the host to invaders such as viruses. While previous strains such as Delta avoided interferon signaling, Omicron actually activated it. Compared to the upper airway, the lungs have a much stronger interferon response, which may prevent Omicron from spreading deep into the lungs. So how would these changes improve the reproductive success of the virus? Well, if the virus remains in the upper airway, it may be able to better spread through coughing and sneezing. More transmission means more replication, meaning more viruses with the mutations that characterize this Omicron variant. A second possible reproductive benefit for the virus could be directly related to its decreased virulence. If infected individuals tend to experience less severe illness, this may increase their exposure to other people, ultimately resulting in increased transmission. For example, the typical symptoms of Omicron are much different from those of previous strains and in some ways quite similar to the common cold. It's possible that this translated to infected individuals inadvertently spreading the virus because they didn't know they were even infected by it. So that's the story of Omicron. Does this mean that the virus is on its way to becoming endemic? Well, if we compare its evolutionary progression to that of relatively similar airborne viruses, such as previous influenza strains, things are looking pretty hopeful. But for now, it's important that we continue to remain vigilant. Well, that's all for this one, and we'll see you in the next video.